To introduce Martin formally, Martin is going to talk about digital WFM and AI future business fit strategy. Martin has been a CEO of some of the organizations in first BPOs and customer satisfaction and customer experience consultancies in the UK, and then later which went on to build his organization called Brian for Consulting. It has been decades so far, and he has been offering a lot of services in this, including conference sharing, keynote speeches, webinars, white paper publishing, workshops, consulting and mentoring the current topics, including the responding to the new customers' behavior, emotive customer experience, for customer interaction, digital first customer service strategy, and trends in contact centers. Martin has been a thought leader and he's a CEO coach and business consultant and strategy consultant for many of the organizations. Martin has studied from Oxford University in UK. A lot to talk about Martin, and Martin has been considered as one of the top 10 influencers in the world in 2020 as per the GWFM's research. Great to have you with us, Martin, and I really appreciate your time that you have taken to spend time with us and rest of the audience globally, and privileged to have you with us. And with this, hand over the control to you. I have your slides.
Well, it's always a pleasure and a privilege. And thank you very much for inviting me back. And I'm looking forward to resuming our conversation, really. I don't know quite whether or not I have a similar audience or an entirely different one today, but I would not personally pretend to be a deep subject matter expert in the business of forecasting, scheduling and planning, but I do understand the dynamics of customer service and the dynamics of contact centers. And I also have a really keen interest in the impact that AI is increasingly having, not just in resource planning, but in fact right the way across the contact center, really moving us from a kind of a reactive type of activity to increasingly a proactive and a predictive one. And I presented this last time talking about some of the bigger sort of meta trends, I think, that are coming through. And this is another chapter in that story. I touch on some of the same themes again, but I think it provides an overview of some of the important things that we need to be factoring in. And the first one is indeed to do with the fact that we really are living in an uncertain world. I don't know whether or not the language of volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity strikes you as being relevant, but most of us will say there's never been a time like the last 18 months. And of course, planning in such a difficult world makes things even more difficult. And AI is absolutely a solution, a timely solution in that sense, that it can take very large data sets and help us decipher and make sense of those things. And so our basic ability to forecast and to schedule and therefore to deliver outcomes that customer and brand want from us is definitely improved by being able to increasingly translate all of that data that is coming into us from both within our organization and from the outside world, by being able to predict and make sense of that and have that as an input into our forecast. And I'd like to give you a few examples of that greater volatility and uncertainty and ambiguity. Thank you. So here's one, which is an interesting fact. What's happened to contact from customers? Has it increased? Has it decreased? And you can see here from a global study from Vonage that in fact the answer is it all depends, even within a sector. For some, they have seen more engagement from customers, some have seen a decline, some have seen a status quo. But overall, you're seeing new engagement patterns, and that again challenges some of our assumptions in terms of how much we can extrapolate historic trends and project them forward in terms of a reliable source to help us produce accurate scheduling at the end of the day. So first point on volatility and uncertainty is new engagement patterns. there has also been, and also if we could do the build on that as well, there's also been a lot of change in terms of, contactless engagement as everybody locked down precipitated a move away from certainly face-to-face. Voice channels were often overwhelmed. So-called digital channels came through very strongly, particularly mobile-first behaviors. No surprise that messaging has been strong. Very much aware of the fact that messaging has been rolled out and adopted probably in quite distinctive ways from a global perspective. Here in the UK, we've been a little reticent in terms of adopting beyond chat, the asynchronicity of messaging. But here was a great conversation that popped up from a session I had with some frontline teams probably about 6 weeks ago now, down in Wales. And again, just to see in a very, very short space of time how messaging leapt from being very, very small to an increasingly significant channel. And again, raises that question. You've suddenly got a new skill that you've got to cater for. You've got a new channel that customers have gone for. And interestingly, by the way, the reason given here was, we're on furlough, we're on home working. By the way, it's now preferable. So if those circumstances change around furlough, and again, local to the UK, we're almost come to the end of that period of time, is that going to again impact the way in which messaging for that particular organisation has become so popular? Or again, are we going to see unexpected change of appetite in terms of how people are going to engage? Another factor in terms of an uncertain world. And again, it's interesting that probably one thing that most of us would say is that omnichannel is undoubtedly rapidly maturing. We are beginning to see an appetite for all the modalities, voice, text, and even video turning up very strongly. And yet we're not necessarily doing a good job because it's happened so quickly. And an immaturity of just providing the technology platforms without necessarily redesigning and orchestrating the service experience results in the fact that research tells us that many customers are forced to change channel, not because they wish to, but because the organization was unable to give them the outcome they wanted within the channel that they had chosen. And they're still being forced to do that. And if we continue on the build on this slide, that is not good for customer satisfaction. In fact, being forced to do something that we don't want to do, if you look at the research, if we can just go to the next part of the build there, we can see that actually that whenever we're forced to choose a channel, that definitely increases the degree of dissatisfaction with customers as a result of that. And if we have the final build, I have a small little personal story just to illustrate how frustrating this can be. I, a while back, renewed my insurance with an organization. It was available as an app. I thought that would be quite useful to see my policy. It'd be quite useful to see my monthly payments. So I decided to use it when I got a crack on the screen of my new car and I had to get it replaced. I wanted to use insurance for that. And I tried to get that fixed through this particular app. Unfortunately, and if we could just have the last build, I went into the app in the first instance. I had a look around there and noticed there was a chat capability, which is great. So I started to use that, went through the whole thing, only to discover, of course, unfortunately, that I can't actually use chat as a channel in order to get a claim. Oh no, I have to go back to the phone. So in fact, I wasn't even told before. In fact, within the app itself, it promoted the idea that I could get a claim done within that particular channel. Couldn't do that. I then had to go back to the phone, and indeed it got even worse after that. I couldn't even complete it in the way over the phone, but that's another story. All of which adds to the cognitive overload. From the point of view of planning, though, what it does, it increases complexity in terms of customers using more than one channel. It probably also increases or decreases first-time resolution and increases the volume of activity that the customer is forced to go through. So again, as a significantly important trend that we're seeing at the moment, as omni-channel rises, it does not necessarily guarantee that the way in which we think customers, we want them to use those channels, is going to manifest in the way that those customers actually do use those channels. So again, immature use can lead to greater complexity, greater cost, and greater overhead in terms of the need for humans to get involved to fix those problems. And here's another one, which is that, you know, greater uncertainty around new patterns of customer demand. And here's Again, something I listened to as a story when I was chairing a session a couple of months ago now. And again, if you're in the airline business, the travel business, the hospitality business, you know, it remains incredibly frustrating to know what's going to be taking place. And for this particular organization, Love Holidays, you know, the pattern of demand, the historic pattern of demand is absolutely well established. UK-based holidaymakers book holidays in January and then get active again around the actual event sometime in the summer. Apart from that, nothing really happening. What's happened now is every single time the government, very late in the day often, has changed the rules around the ability to travel, of course that has created unprecedented demand. And this was actually a story about the way in which they migrated from voice only to be able to deal with it through other ways, to be able to automate refunds, to be able to automate conversations around of new legislation, new travel restrictions and what needs to be done. This particular part that I'm sharing with you here is the latest phase in their sort of contact strategy, which is now to use not only chatbots, but also the context that interaction history provides in order to be able to provide a more personalized and useful service at the end of the day. But underneath of that, if you were in that particular industry, imagine the complexities of trying to do your planning. You know, you have incredible uncertainty. You really don't know what's going to be taking place. And also, you don't have any knowledge of the degree to which your self-service strategy, you know, which has emerged very, very rapidly in this period of time, the degree to which it's going to succeed or not, and therefore the degree to which you still need to be able to cater to live human-to-human interaction. So again, much greater uncertainty in terms of being able to do your job effectively. And then, you know, we spent some time in the previous discussion exploring this. You know, again, I think the jury is still out on the detail of what is going to take place with hybrid working. I'm referring primarily to, well, actually, I'm not just talking about contact centers. I think the headline is, yes, it's going to happen, but the detail is still being figured out. Maybe some of you will have noticed the quite public conversation that's been going on between Tim Cook over at Apple and some of his employees who've pushed back on the fact that he has said, do you know, at the end of the day, the thing that makes us an innovative company is when we're working together face to face. That's where innovation is best facilitated. To which employees have said, no, you're not hearing us here. We actually do want to have the flexibility of permanently home working. And that's what we think we have a right to. And there's quite a lot of argument going on at the moment in terms of exactly how that's going to be facilitated. And to the question that I'm posing here on the screen, there is mixed evidence in terms of whether or not there is greater or lesser productivity. And also, is there a dividend from the organizational perspective? If there is less commute, does that allow us to potentially discuss and negotiate with our employees greater flexibility of shift? Does that result come through? And certainly there is some evidence that the kind of gig economy role and way of working is becoming increasingly popular. There is also considerable evidence going on within the UK and certainly the States right now that not everybody's rushing back to work, and indeed there's quite a lot of reluctance to return to work, a bit like children going back to school after the end of the holiday. I think everybody needs to get reinducted into that. But secondly, what needs to be done is to see whether or not there's a wholesale shift going on in terms of work patterns and whether or not people in certain industries are ever going to return in the same kind of a way. So there's a heck of a movement going on in terms of recruitability, certainly in our sector, and also what it's going to mean at the end of the day in terms of how we can organize our shift. So open question, but all part of this greater uncertainty. And here's just another little story, again, coming from a piece of research. Whole Foods retail brand focusing upon all things to do with mobility, from bicycles to cars, etc., well-known retail chain over here in the UK. And again, Gareth Brophy just making the comment, but, you know, if listening to his own team, obviously it's clearly very popular to have the flexibility to work from home, notwithstanding people's desire to connect and to have the benefits of face-to-face at the end of the day. So again, we're dealing now with new employee expectations and how that will translate into assumptions that we're going to need to have to take going forward. I think that's still an open discussion, all of which adds to greater uncertainty at this point in time. Now, second thing I'd like to add into this general conversation is the rise of data. And of course, the better, you know, the more we know, the better we can plan, is the theme that I'm saying here. So again, if we can just move through these relatively quickly, Here, the first point to be made is the first one is really to do with something I think we all will know. This was from a McKinsey hosted presentation webinar talking actually about customer experience and the use of data for scalable personalization. But again, making the point that the amount that we know about customers has really exponentially grown over the last period and will continue to do so. And so in a more general sense, how does that benefit us? In our context of the contact center, again, I've made this point in a previous presentation, there is a terrific amount that we don't know, but again, machine learning in particular can help us to decipher those patterns in terms of the numbers of topics combined by the numbers of channels, combined by the outcomes for customers and advisors and the brand, combined by the numbers and types of customers. There is a terrific complexity sitting in there. And again, if we can start to get some value out of that, we are in fundamentally a better place as planners to be able to make accurate forecasts. And the last point, and again, there is a general and broader recognition. Now, this might apply to you, or this might well be on your strategic digital transformation roadmap, that there is a change now in terms of the way that we're trying to use the value of data. And there is a rise in customer data platforms, which is one way in which you can get more access to more data in lieu of and instead of the more narrow functional view that CRM provides. So again, we're beginning to see a world in which we recognize the importance of data, and of course data and AI and machine learning are fundamentally two problems, two sides of the same issue, if you want, at the end of the day. So something else that we're beginning to see as a trend is recognition that we need to get our data into a better place. We have a richer data set, particularly around our customers. That will drive a more insightful ability to predict and therefore to forecast and schedule more accurately. Thank you. So that's a trend that we can take into account. And then the final thing I just want to have as a little word of warning, and that is to say that whilst AI is undoubtedly transforming our ability to deal with greater complexity, and by the way, it is something that is coming into play right the way across the contact center. So what we've been discussing, in terms of planning is just one of the use cases sitting in contact centers, obviously forecasting and scheduling. There's another one that's just popping into view, and indeed some people who are providing the platforms for workforce management are now also adding in things like recruitment and interviewing, and the language being used is intelligent interviewing. And I just wanted to make a wee point about AI and being enthusiastic about it, but still being discriminating about it. And if we can come into the next slide, please, I'll tell my story. So again, here is some language which again is all about intelligent interviewing. It goes beyond the traditional workforce management goal of having right people, right place, right time, gives you the ability to have the right people with the right characteristics available at the right time and space. Clearly that sounds attractive. However, interesting, I saw this week. It's out there. I've been sharing it on LinkedIn. Somebody who I think probably knows what they're talking about, Arvind, who's Associate Professor of Computer Science over at Princeton, makes the point in a very interesting paper, which is available. I've given you the URL at the bottom there, is that, if we are looking at this new trend, there are many organizations right now who are claiming that if a person who wants to get a job submits, in this particular instance, simply a 30-second video of themselves pitching for that job, then AI is capable of assessing personality and job suitability on the basis of that, and deriving, the particular attributes that are positive or negative, coming from body language, speech patterns, etc., all based on algorithms that can get trained. Now, there's a lot of money going into that marketplace, a lot of startups and scale-ups, a lot of VC money going into that space. He's pushing back on that and saying, listen, at the end of the day, that is not a realistic thing. That is not actually what AI is about. Essentially, it's simply an elaborate random number generator. Don't get conned. He's called it snake oil at the end of the day. Now, I'm not particularly gunning for that. I just use that as an illustration to say AI is significant. You do also need to understand what's going on underneath the bonnet and whether or not it's giving you value or is actually deluding you at the end of the day. Anyway, that being said, thank you. Yes, let's go along to the takeaways. and just come to a point of summary. So again, I said this last time, but I'll say it again because I still think it's hugely relevant, which is that we really do need to make sure that as planners, we continue to broaden our understanding of not just what we do, but the market out there, the customers, the employee trends. These are all massively influential on our ability to get our job done. To that extent, we need to plug ourselves in more deeply to the management decision making around of those particular topics, so we're informed, we're upfront, we can also comment upon what we see are the implications of that from a planning perspective. There is huge change going on at the end of the day. And finally, AI is here, it's turning up, it's only going to become more profound, so is the amount of data, and again, what new skills might we need as a result of that, and indeed the world that we live in, is there some value to deal with marketplaces which have always dealt with greater volatility, and learning how they do some of those modeling techniques at the end of the day. So there's some thoughts for you to take away. Hope you've enjoyed that, and I shall hand you back now for maybe a couple of questions if we've still got the time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Martin. Truly very insightful. In fact, I myself enjoyed it truly. It's a new innovation. Absolutely, this is a need for the hour and essential for all the WFM professionals to know this. Let me have a quick check on the questions.
I'll take that as a compliment. I've answered all the questions.
Yeah,
I think it's a whole new world. It's a lot to think about.
Right. Martin, there's one question. Where do you see that 5 to 10 years down the line, as far as WFM industry is concerned, how is it going to evolve? And as far as the skill set and mindset of WFM professionals, and also kind of technologies that what we use now, and where do you take us in 5 years down the line, or what do we see in 5 to 10 years down the line? 5 years being a short term and long term being 10 years. Yeah. I mean, we just throw some.
I think for me the fundamental thing is where do people fit in terms of the delivery of service, the delivery and the doing of work. So if we take the combination of automation, which again, typically at this point is probably augmenting rather than replacing, but is taking some of the lower level administrative work. What does that mean in terms of how we can refocus on higher value engagement or higher value, more cognitive tasks? That I think is definitely in a 5-year context going to be much more established. It's already got great momentum. Self-service, conversational AI is growing, continuing to grow. I think customers have got a real appetite, particularly during the pandemic. My personal view is that a mature customer contact strategy probably ends up with no more than 25% live interaction, because the remainder has either been dealt with through automation or through self-service. I can quote you one organisation in the UK, a retailer, who's already found that their bot channel is now the biggest channel by volume. They've done such a good job of making sure that the outcome the customer wants is contained within that channel through some really deep back-end integration, through some great conversational design, so it really does work, through continuous iteration and improvement of the bot experience. Customers use it and they've gone to it, and really the remaining need for using humans is when it's emotive, when it's complex, when it matters to the relationship. So they're already on trend, as far as that's concerned. And if you're asking me the question, where will most of us be within 5 years? I think we will be there. And then we've got the pure AI component of patterning and predicting, and therefore communicating to customers about things like fraud, about things like delivery, about things that you didn't know you needed, but I'm telling you because I know you're likely to need it soon. And we're beginning to see a world in which a lot of the use of humans has been replaced in a more intelligent, proactive way. So I think that in 5 years, we will see a quite different profile of person who will have emerged, because the nature of the conversation will be different. It will be higher value, it will be longer, it will require, I think, deeper skills on active listening, on empathy. It will be more data driven, it will be more valuable. So I think we can afford to change the way in which we recruit, what we can afford to pay, and indeed the kind of person we imagine should be involved in that, because the consequences will link much more clearly, and we will be tracking this, to CX goals, around of advocacy, around of propensity to buy more, around of long-time lifetime value, all of those kind of, quite commercial goals. And indeed, that person and that team that are doing the live intervention, I think will be much more structurally connected into those particular targets, and therefore the value, will have changed. If you go 10 years out, then I think that we're looking at a world where we as customers, or we as humans, will find that virtual assistants are a persistent thing in our lives, from school onwards, from university, from being in our different jobs. We have just got somebody who's with us all the time, who knows us. They do our bidding in terms of our shopping, in terms of helping us in our daily tasks. And those kinds of virtual assistants, again, will be interacting with the brand's set of virtual assistants as well, at the end of the day, negotiating. And the difference between virtual me and real me, both for the advisor and for the customer, there's a whole new set of relationships which will come through. And in 10 years' time, that will be really probably a much more persistent and everyday reality, as we speak. So customer service as such, I think, will also have changed, because I don't think, as we've got to grips with the data, that we will be organized in the same way. We'll be much more a single type organization, unified in a completely new way. Cloud will be absolutely everywhere. We'll fundamentally have reinvented how organizations function, and the focus upon cross-functional will be much more strong than siloed. And therefore, I think the relationship between sales and marketing and service teams, married to life cycle management and particular customer journeys, will be much more commonplace as well. So therefore, the contact center will have merged with selling and marketing activity in an entirely new kind of way. And I rather suspect, back to the conversation we had last time in the last session, that where the place of work, where work takes place, will be entirely discretionary in a way that we're still debating at this point in time.
Absolutely. I agree to your thoughts. Great answer. And I
Thank
have
you.
other questions, Martin. Some of the mid-sized kind of organizations where they have reluctance to invest and technology. They always been comfortable with a spreadsheet, and also like they're trying to have their homegrown tool where they don't want to get into enterprise automation.
Yep.
So still, they look at the cost as something that, whereas they're not looking at this as a kind of investment. What do you suggest that organizations should do to evolve and also move with the flow, where customers are evolving, where their expectation is something A class, right?
So what's going to happen to those kind of folk? Well, I mean, it's always been the case, hasn't it, that unless you were a certain size contact center, conventional wisdom was you didn't need to automate your workforce management, and back to your good old spreadsheet will do the day. I think that will continue for a period of time. However, eventually there is going to be a solution, a technology-based solution that will fit the pockets for everybody. Already, if you look, for example, at some of the things I've talked about today with machine learning, algorithms, AI, that in a way isn't new. It's actually been around, for a decade, possibly even slightly longer than that, in terms of how it's affected customer service and organizations generally speaking. And it's belonged to those brands that have done tremendous jobs, like the Deliveroo's, the Netflix, and all the names that we all know and love. However, it's been extremely expensive, and you needed very, very deep pockets. What's happened much more recently, and people like Google and Amazon and those kind of global players who bring new technology to market and commoditize the price points, what we're beginning to see now is baked-in capability. I was talking to Amazon, recently, and they said, well, in terms of the algorithms that are relevant to a call center interaction, they're already fine-tuned, they're already available, they're already part of the service that we provide. You don't have to build those any longer. You don't need your data scientists. You don't need that. You're simply buying and using it on demand. So already there has been a democratization of access to that kind of technology, which again was a barrier to entry even just 5 years back. So if that trend continues, and I see no reason that that shouldn't do, the price point and the availability of technology to drive this kind of activity will continue. until eventually all price points and all sizes of contact centers will be served and they will be satisfied at the end of the day. Whether that's in the next 6 months or the next couple of years, it's a matter of demand and, startups filling in the gaps that weren't there in the first instance. But I have no doubt that at the end of the day, you will not really be able to operate in a marketplace which is increasingly digital if you're still going to use spreadsheets, even, by the way, if you've only got 50 people overall who are needing to be managed and organized.
Absolutely, Martin. I think that's all like organization should really, like evolve, and when customer is expecting, which is A class, and if they want to grow with the flow, they need to really
Yes.
think that this is something like an investment, not at the cost, right? Absolutely.
And if you just think,
Yeah.
I mean, I spent some time in systems integration. It's probably about 10 years now. But going back to when I was involved in, marketing and selling and talking to customers, to the question you just asked, the price point, of workforce management systems was certainly prohibitive at that point in time to certain sized organizations in a way that's just not true 10 years later. So reiterating the point, I think it's a problem that will just disappear as the market matures and commoditizes.
I don't see any more questions as of now, Martin. If there are any questions, I'll come back to you. Probably you could answer them with your response. It was indeed great having you with us, and GWFM expresses deepest gratitude. I mean, we're having second time with us, Martin. I mean, first time and second time has been a great learning and highly insightful. Looking forward to seeing you many more events in future, and probably I'll have to connect with you on the podcast, and another one is on the leadership interview series. I'll connect with you sometime later by next week to schedule.
I'm always delighted to do that. Yes, thank you very much. And in the way that I can do, very much enjoy being able to contribute some of these bigger trends into the industry. As I said, some of the detailed stuff I'm not going to be able to make much value, but certainly in terms of understanding what's happening in our organizations from a customer engagement point of view, I'm always delighted to contribute and always very grateful for you inviting me into the community. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks, Martin, and good to have the research that you have been doing, and I've been following you in LinkedIn. A lot of insights every day. I see that like new insights. Feel free to share us, and where you see that our members have to get benefited out of that, we'll communicate that, and we have the newsletter, and
Yes.
we'll be able to add your blog or the article or white paper as a learning material for them, and we'll be able to circulate that.
Thank you, appreciate it. And anybody who wants the slides, you're absolutely welcome to recirculate those again if you would like to do that.
Sure. Thanks for mentioning that, and I'll definitely have this shared to all the members. Yeah, so much.
Thank you very much.